Friends, today we're using some Jenga blocks and other Dollar Tree items to create 6 home decor projects. First up, I'm making a decorative box, and I like to use my L roller when creating Jenga block projects to make sure my rows stay nice and straight. This wood glue super glue, also from Dollar Tree, is the perfect glue for Jenga blocks. Because this is a super glue, it starts to set up in about a minute, so you can keep working. Where hot glue leaves a space between your blocks, and then straight wood glue just takes way too long to dry. So if you haven't tried this glue yet, you need to pick it up. For the first section of this box, I'm gluing 12 blocks together in a row, and I did that 2 times. I wanted the sides to be a little bit taller, but didn't want to stack 2 blocks high. So instead I glued a row of 4 blocks on the top and bottom, going the opposite direction for some interest. For the short sides of the box, I glued 6 blocks together and then added 2 on the top and bottom. Now to assemble the box, I just glued the 4 sides together and placed the long sides in between the short sides. That way, when looking at the front, it almost has a border around the center blocks. Then I glued 2 sets of 13 blocks together and added that as the bottom. Next, I'm going to add some feet to the bottom. I use these decorative caps from Walmart, but you could certainly keep a Dollar Tree and use wood beads or the small wood squares. I let the box dry for a little bit, and now I want to add some detail to it. So I picked up this new IOD mold recently called Olive Crest and couldn't wait to use it. It is stunning, but I did not buy the IOD air dry clay because I have a few other packs that I need to work through first. When using a silicone mold, you want to dust the bottom with cornstarch so your clay comes out easily and clean. I put way too much clay into this first mold. Less is definitely more here. You can always add on more. Once I finally cleaned the edges up and pulled the clay out, I placed it on top of the box to dry. I did paint the mold once it dried, but I'm not going to go too much into detail there. I didn't end up keeping it, but I wanted to still share my process with you. Next, I gave the box a heavy dry brush of white chalk paint. I wanted the wood to show through, but mostly be white. Then I glued the olive branches on with E6000, but this is where I decided I didn't like the way that it was looking, so I took them off and made a new mold using this ornate label. This time I just painted it white and then added some florals into the box, and that's it for this one. I love the way this box turned out, but let me know in the comments, which mold did you prefer? For this project, I'm taking a Dollar Tree mirror and removing the backer as well as the mirror so I can paint the frame. Before painting, I did give the surface a scuff sand so that the paint will stick better. And I gave it a coat of Heirloom White by Rust-Oleum, but for some reason the spray paint was not drying and just stayed tacky, so I ended up going in with Drop Cloth by Dixie Belle. Next, I found this paper-like reed stuff at Dollar Tree last summer, and I've never seen it since, which is unfortunate, but I know you can find this stuff at other craft stores. I cut down several strands to start adding loops around the frame of the mirror and used hot glue to attach it. I did one layer with the loops right next to each other, and then did a second layer of smaller loops overlapping in between the larger ones. Next, I'm taking these half wood beads. I got these from Amazon and will link them below for you. I know these are not Dollar Tree, but Dollar Tree is selling wood bead packs now, so you can use those and cut them in half or use them as is. When adding wood beads to a project, I like to leave a small space between each bead. That way, when you get to the end, if they don't fit perfectly, it is a lot harder to tell and less noticeable. Where if you glue them right up against each other, you will see an obvious space at the end. Next, I put the mirror back on, but had to glue it down with popsicle sticks because of the paper spline, but that's it for this one. It was super quick and easy. This project is nothing new, but something I still wanted to create. So I'm making a tissue box cover for my bathroom, and this one's going to require a few packs of Jenga blocks. I'm gluing 6 rows of 5 blocks together, however, I want the rows to be staggered. So I glue 1 row of 5 full blocks, and then the next row had 4 full blocks and 1 block cut in half with 1 half on either end. And then I glued the rows together. For the short sides, I used 3 blocks and again staggered them. You can see the rows are not all the same length because, as we all know, Dollar Tree products are not all created equal, so to fix that, I used my miter box again and cleaned up the edges. Before adding the top of the box, I glued the sides together, that way I could make sure it was big enough to fit around my tissue boxes and easily slide off and on. For the top, I glued 16 blocks in a row, long sides together, and I made 2 pieces like this. For the opening, I added 3 blocks to the ends, going the opposite direction. You could leave the box just like this and be done. I wanted to add some more detail, so I painted the box with watered down burlap color paint by Dixie Belle. I wanted to still see the wood grain through the paint. I wanted to give the box a little bit more depth as well, so I added my DIY dark wax. Just the tiniest bit was all it needed, and I used a baby wipe to apply it. That way it wouldn't get too dark or streaky. For one last detail, I'm taking this IOD rub-on transfer Painterly Florals. This transfer is so beautiful. I used the lavender pieces along the front and partially around the sides. But I wanted to make the transfers look like part of the box. So I took my X-Acto knife over each line of the blocks, and now the tissue box is complete. Next up, we're making some wall art. I finally found the blank long wood plaques at Dollar Tree in both the larger and smaller sizes. So for this project, I'm using 3 of the large ones and 6 of the small ones. First, I filled in all the holes with lightweight spackle and then painted the boards white. Then I cut out a monstera leaf on my Cricut with Oracle vinyl. I want to do a reverse stencil, so I weeded out the leaf and placed it onto the boards. Each stencil is going to cover 3 boards, and I cut between the boards with my X-Acto knife to separate them. Next, I'm taking a new color by Waverly, Sage, or at least it's new to my store, and I am obsessed with it. I gave each of the boards 3 thin coats of paint. I created 2 smaller art pieces with the smaller boards, but I used Dollar Tree vinyl on these ones. I haven't used the Dollar Tree vinyl yet and wanted to give it a try. I was really nervous because I've heard mixed reviews and didn't want to ruin my projects, but let me tell you, I was incredibly impressed. I might even dare to say it was better than the Oracle for doing a reverse stencil. Since I had to add multiple layers of paint, I couldn't remove the vinyl while the paint was wet. With the Oracle vinyl, I ended up having to take my X-Acto knife around all of the edges before peeling the vinyl off, which was extremely tedious. Where with the Dollar Tree vinyl, it came off so easily and looked so clean. Next, I wanted to add a frame so these would look a little more elevated. I still have plenty of pole wrap laying around, and this matched my bathroom perfectly. I don't know why I didn't record it, but I cut the pole wrap down with my miter shears and glued them down around the edges. Last, I just added a sawtooth hanger to the back, and this one's complete. Have you tried the Dollar Tree vinyl yet? Let me know what you think about it. Alright, this one is Pinterest inspired, and I came across this image and then saw the price and knew I could definitely make it with Jenga blocks. I just had to figure out how to make it look rounded, so that's where dowel rods come in. I glued a dowel to the edge of one block and then to the edge of a second, but leaned the blocks in towards each other to start forming a rounded shape. And I repeated this with 5 blocks and 4 dowels. I let that set up and dry for a few minutes and then added one more block just in a row, this time to both ends, and created a second arch set to glue both sides together. Then I glued a few more block sets together and added them to the oval. I needed a bottom for the oval, so I cut out a piece of foam core board and glued that on. This would also be really cute as a bird feeder. I also made a second oval piece for the top, and here's how it's looking so far. Last, I added a jute hanger, and that's it for this one. It was really easy to make. I filled the bottom in with some rocks and then added my air plant. This version cost less than $1, which is much better than the sale price of $115. Next up, I have 4 of these Dollar Tree tabletop reception signs. I've had these ones for a while. They actually changed the shape and made these signs with actual arrows instead, but I'm making a fence and removed the stands from the back. I found these peel and stick wallpaper tiles at Dollar Tree and loved the chevron pattern. If you watch Brandy at the DIY Struggle, she did a browsing video recently where she said this print looked like 70s paneling. I immediately sent her a picture of this project and asked if it looked dated. We have been cracking up over that comment.
You know what this reminds me of? Paneling from the 80s. Oh yeah, that's what this reminds me of.
But wanted to share that with you guys because I am still laughing in my head editing this video. I cut the wallpaper in half and wanted the center of the chevron to be in the middle of my fence post. I just peeled the back off and stuck it onto the board and then used my X-Acto knife to cut off the excess and repeated that for all 4 pieces. I want the fence posts to be a graduated height, so I laid them out on my cutting mat using the grid lines to see how tall I want each piece. And then used my roller to draw a line where each piece needs cut down and used my utility knife to cut them. Next, I'm taking some Jenga blocks and glued 2 sets of 7 blocks together and 2 sets of 7.5 blocks together to create a base. I wanted the base to be like a step, but didn't want the bottom step to be a full block longer. Then I glued the fence pieces on, and I started with hot glue, but quickly realized that was not sticking to the slick surface of the wallpaper and ended up having to use super glue instead. Next, I added a square dowel to the front on a diagonal. I also used hot glue first on this, but went back in with my super glue. I used one of the scrap pieces from cutting down the fence to screw a C-hook in. I want to add a hanging bucket with some greenery and need something a little more sturdy than just the dowel. I attached that to the fence and added my greenery bucket. That's it for this one, so let me know in the comments, do you think this wallpaper reminds you of 70s paneling? For more Dollar Tree DIYs, check out this video right here, and I'll see you in the next one.